If you clicked on this video, then you're probably worried about losing muscle mass during your fat loss phase. Last thing you want to do is put in all that effort only to be a skinnier version of yourself. We want to be lean, we want to be muscular. I understand where you're coming from. As a pro natural bodybuilder, the last thing I want to do is lose muscle mass during my fat loss phase. And don't worry, in this video, I'm going to show you the exact 6 steps that you need to follow to make sure that you're able to strip off fat without losing muscle. Welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan. I'm an ex-NFL player, online coach, and pro natural bodybuilder. And this channel is all about finding the most efficient way to help you lose fat and build muscle. Step number 1 is exercise selection. We need to make sure that we're providing enough of a stimulus for the body to want to keep muscle around. But we also don't want to provide too much fatigue, as resources for recovery is going to be limited during a fat loss phase. When in a build phase, we've got plenty of energy reserves in our fat. We also have plenty of energy coming in through the extra calories. But when going into a fat loss phase, and especially into the depths of a fat loss phase when we're getting leaner and also food is getting lower, we're not going to have as much resources for recovery to be able to reduce fatigue from session to session. So we need to make sure that we're picking exercises that give us a great stimulus, but don't come with a lot of unwanted fatigue. For this very reason, I recommend choosing machine-based exercises instead of big barbell compound movements. I have nothing against barbell compound movements. I have them a lot in my training program, especially when I'm in a build phase. However, when going into a fat loss phase and getting deep into that fat loss phase, it's not really worth the trade-off for that extra little bit of stimulus to have such high fatigue. So you could swap something like a barbell back squat for, say, a pendulum squat or a leg press, which is going to provide more stability and also less fatigue, but we're not going to be reducing the amount of stimulus that we're providing to the target muscle. Step number 2 is frequency. Unfortunately, the bro split of hitting a muscle group once per week just isn't going to cut it during a fat loss phase. We need to be hitting muscle groups at least twice per week to make sure we are providing an adequate amount of stimulus across the week to want to keep that muscle mass during our fat loss phase. Now, depending on how many days per week you can allocate towards your resistance training session will depend on what split you go for. I would recommend for people doing 3 days per week to do a full body split. Because you only have 3 days, you want to make sure that you're getting enough frequency in. Therefore, I would recommend hitting full body 3 times per week. Main reason for this being is you're not going to be able to provide as much stimulus doing a full body session as, say, an upper or a lower session. It'll be a better idea to do 3 full body sessions across the week to even out that limited amount of stimulus that we're able to provide in the one session. And if you're someone able to do 4 days per week, I would recommend an upper lower. For people doing 5 days per week, you could do a push, pull, legs, upper lower. And for people doing 6 days, you can do a push, legs, pull, push, legs, pull. Now, if you need help with any programming, I have all my links in the description of all of these programs below. They are free, and I even have my current program that I'm following at the moment, which is a 6-day per week. So I'd definitely be looking to check those out. All the links are in the description below. Step number 3 is volume. Now, what is volume? Volume is how many sets we get across the week for a given muscle group. Now, studies would suggest the more volume you do, the more muscle growth you will see. However, in a fat loss phase, more doesn't always mean better, especially because we have limited recovery resources. So we don't want to bury ourselves with too many sets, meaning that we can't recover from session to session. We also need to be able to keep performance up and make sure that the sets we're doing are of a high enough intensity to be able to give us enough of a stimulus to keep muscle around. Therefore, I would recommend from 6 to 15 sets per muscle group per week. Now, generally, for bigger muscle groups, they can do less volume like hamstrings and quads. You could probably get away with 6 to 8 sets per week. And then for smaller muscle groups like arms and delts, you could probably do on that higher end between 10 to 15. And also, depending on what muscle group you would like to prioritize to make sure you don't lose that during your fat loss phase, you can also give that a little bit more volume as well. Now, it may not seem like much only doing 6 sets per week, But that's why we need to make sure that these sets are hit with an adequate intensity, which is going to be our step number 4, is proximity to failure. We need to make sure that the sets that we are doing are taken to a close proximity of failure. Research would suggest that the closer you get to failure, the better the stimulus for muscle growth, especially if it's 3 or less. So I would recommend that any working set that you do, you make sure that you take it within 3 reps of failure. This means if you're doing, say, a barbell bench press and you do 100 kilos for 10 reps, and that is your absolute max, if someone held a gun to your head, that's as many as you could do. If you do 9 reps, that would mean you have 1 rep in reserve. If you do 8 reps, that would mean you have 2 reps in reserve. If you do 7 reps, then you have 3 reps in reserve. I would recommend never going below 7 reps for that particular exercise, because that would mean that you're further than 3 reps shy of failure. So we need to make sure that majority of our sets are taken within 3 reps shy of failure. This will ensure that we're providing enough of a stimulus to the target muscle to keep that target muscle around. Now, I would recommend when doing big compound movements to leave a little bit more reps in reserve than isolation movements. So something like a leg press, you could probably do from 3 to 1 reps in reserve. And something like a bicep curl, you probably want to be 2 or even taken completely to failure. Main reason for this being is that compound movements are going to result in a lot more fatigue the closer you take that to failure. And the stimulus probably isn't going to raise as much as what fatigue is. But when doing isolation exercises, there's not really that much fatigue there. And we all know this. Doing a bicep curl is a lot less fatiguing, especially when you take that to failure compared to a leg press. So isolation exercises, you probably want to be closer to failure than what you would be for compound exercises. But definitely wouldn't be going outside of that 3 reps in reserve. And step number 5 is progressive overload. Now, I'm not going to lie, it is going to be hard to progress during a fat loss phase, but we don't want to go into that fat loss phase with the mindset thinking that we're going to lose strength. If we're losing strength and losing performance on our lifts, then the likelihood of us losing muscle mass is going to be pretty high. So we need to make sure that we're at least maintaining performance, even getting slight progressions here and there to make sure that we are maintaining muscle mass during this fat loss phase. So make sure you stay patient, because progression isn't going to come all the time. Focus on maintaining and then just grabbing little progressions when you can. This is going to set you up for the best possible chance of maintaining muscle mass. And step number 6 is form. In my opinion, I think form is very important, especially in a fat loss phase. Now, there's only one study that has ever been done on form, and it showed that you can grow the same amount of muscle with bad form as what you can with good form. However, the people that were in the bad form group did a lot more reps and a lot more weight to only get the same amount of muscle growth as the people in the good form group. So therefore, you would have to say doing poor form would result in a little bit more fatigue than what would doing good form. Now, it's fine for form to slip every now and then, but you want to make sure that majority of your sets are done with relatively good form to make sure that the target muscle is getting the required stimulus without all of that added fatigue. I also think form is important for when it comes to progressing or even maintaining performance. If we are maintaining performance with good form, we can be pretty confident that we're also maintaining muscle. If we're maintaining performance, but our form is getting worse, we can't really guarantee that we're actually maintaining muscle mass, because we might be using momentum or we might be using other muscle groups. So the target muscle might actually not be getting stronger, actually getting weaker and smaller over time, but we're just masking that by doing poor form, by using extra momentum or using other muscle groups. I also want to leave you with a couple of bonus tips to make sure you're not losing any muscle mass during your next fat loss phase. First of all, we want to make sure that we're recovering as best we can between sessions. And the best way to do this is to nail our sleep. Sleep is so important, not only for recovering between sessions and keeping performance up, but it also directly affects how much muscle we lose or how much muscle we maintain during a fat loss phase. Now, if you haven't already, I'll definitely check out this video here and I go into detail of how sleep affects fat loss and the muscle that we maintain during this fat loss phase. And second bonus tip is being strategic with your nutrition. Now, you should be eating a high protein diet to make sure that we're keeping muscle protein synthesis up. When energy resources are low, muscle protein synthesis will generally go down. So we want to make sure that we're eating a high protein diet to try and boost up muscle protein synthesis so that we can maintain muscle. And also, we want to be strategic about our meal timing, especially getting into the depths of this fat loss phase. We want to make sure that we're fueling our workouts properly, having a protein and carbohydrate rich meal a couple of hours before and a couple of hours post. So not leaving too much time pre and post workout to make sure that we're fueled and also to make sure we kickstart that recovery process. And last bonus tip, if you're someone who is doing cardio during this fat loss phase, I would recommend keeping your cardio as far away from your resistance training as possible. And if you're someone who has to do it on the same day or even close to the similar session, then you really need to be smart with your meal timing, either getting a feed in before your cardio session if possible, or just making sure that if you have to do it back to back, that you don't wait too long before getting a decent meal in. As always, guys, hope this has helped. Do all those good things, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. And as always, I have all my links in the description below. The training programs I showed you before. I also have the 21-step guide to fat loss and the fat loss checklist. They are all linked in the description below. And if you want to work one-to-one with myself, that is also linked in the description below. Now, if you want to know exactly how many calories you should be eating to maintain muscle mass and also lose a huge chunk of fat, then I'll be checking out this video here where I go into detail into exactly how many calories you should be eating to lose fat without losing muscle mass. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.